What can listeners do
Yeah.
to think about things a little bit more critically to cut through the noise?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I honestly think there are so many different answers. But the thing that's kind of coming to mind for me right now is the idea that one way to measure our mental toughness is how affected you become by things outside of your control. The less affected you are by things outside of your control, the more mentally tough you are. And so I think one good tool or strategy that people can use to start to foster that ability to see the difference between those two things is, I actually call it and I'm not the only person, I know a lot of people have used this before, but it's called the circle of control. And you just take out a piece of paper and draw a circle in the middle of it. And in the middle of the circle, write all the things within your control. And on the outside of that circle, write all the things outside of it. And allow that to serve as just a visual representation of what's within your control and what's outside of reach. Because in any given situation, if you can define those two things, you understand where your power lies and where it doesn't. It doesn't mean you can't give effort to things outside of your control, but your power is not going to be as effective as if you direct it to the things within it. And so I do think that if we can help people define those two things, we can make better choices, better decisions, and I would even go as far to say, as from a journaling perspective, be able to become more aware of the things that we can and cannot do.
It's the Jocko Willink approach of bad thing, good. It's how do you assess these things? I mean, the mechanism for me is exposure to difficult endurance and physical challenges and events and things, and that's kind of the mechanism that I really buy into, because it's within our control to put ourselves in situations out with our control. And I'm like a child looking forward to hallucinating 42 hours with no sleep down at the end of the month, even though that scares the shit out of me.
Yep.
It's something that I know will make me, the person I will be at the end is a different person at the start. And I think that's where I, over the years, have noticed when, for example, a car has a huge bill that you just have to deal with, it doesn't send me into an emotional spin where I catastrophize. It's just, okay, how do we make this work objectively? What conversations need to be had? What do we need to do? Move on. And that's something that I attribute to repeated exposure to increasingly difficult things on my own terms. But I think something I'll push back a little bit against is get comfortable being uncomfortable is a very popular narrative. It's become very cliched, even though it's very applicable.
Yes.
But I think the nuance is if you can try and go looking for get uncomfortable being uncomfortable on somebody else's terms, I think is the level above that isn't necessarily as popularized on Twitter threads and Instagram posts as much as it might need to be. Because ice baths, good example. They're uncomfortable. You get into them. You overcome that inertia of, I don't want to do this. You do it. Great. That's a win for the day. Move on. But if you're working at your desk, let's say, and somebody chucks you in an ice bath, how you react to that is going to be very different to how you do standing in a towel out your front door and then getting in for 5 minutes and then getting back in for a warm shower. So I think it's the question I often ask myself is, how can I increase the dosage of things that are out with my control that I don't have control over to make me better at dealing with things like incidentals, the economy, government decisions that I disagree with, all these things that can really weigh on our minds quite heavy. And there are a lot of things that you see online that weigh quite heavy on the mind these days. It's chaos out there. So what do you think people should be aspiring to do? Are there any KPIs, are there any metrics that you recommend people try and work into their life to make forward progress in this, so that they can actually monitor their progress with what's in the circle versus what's out?
Yeah, really quick though, because what you said I thought was really interesting, because it made me think of, like, I travel quite a bit, and where that applies to me is that whenever there's a delay or we have an issue with a plane or whatever that is, like, that sucks. Like, there's nothing worse than trying to get where you're trying to go and have something that you have zero control over be the thing that delays you from getting there. And I just got back from a trip, and a friend of mine, she got stuck. Like, she's traveling back to Australia, and she got stuck in Dallas for 2 extra days. She has a toddler. She didn't have a place to stay. It was like a whole thing. And I have actually now trained myself to the point where when that happens, I try to, number one, seek the gift, and I try to go, okay, I can't control this. So what can I control? I can always control the way that I look at it. I can always control how I reframe it. And it seems simple and it might seem cliche, but it actually changes your experience around it. And so when you can change your experience, you can change how you actually live on a day-to-day playing field. And so I know that that stuff doesn't actually upset me as much as it used to. And so if I can find myself in a mood that is actually more consistent with where I want to be, I can actually enjoy those moments, believe it or not. Or I actually just don't get totally taken down by them and just pissed off at the world. Because trust me, I have. And so that's how can I put myself, whether it's my mood, whether it's the way that I look at something, whether it's my perspective, whether it's the energy that I feel, more in a place where I want it to be, because that's how I would like to live my life every day, knowing that I'm going to have moments of, where it doesn't align with that. That's what I'm after. And so even optimizing my perspective, my frameworks, because what we know is that the frame matters more than the picture itself. The way that you look at something actually matters more than the actual thing that's happening to you, because the way that you interpret your data actually changes how your body responds to that data. And so that's why I find that that's really important. So what you described to me is just another opportunity, but oftentimes opportunities are gift wrapped in frustration, potentially pain, discomfort, fear. And so if we can look at those things as, oh, this is an opportunity to practice this skill, it's amazing how our brains could try to meet it.
Why don't we break down that brick by brick process understanding for you that followed next? Because I know that you've been quite methodical about it now. Obviously, There's been a returning to your sense of self, and now there's been a bit more of an academic phase-by-phase process that you can apply to things.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I've been conscious of is that I've been through a lot of life changes, and I'm to put it, I'm as happy as I've ever been right now, and I'm as in control of my life as I've ever been, and my relationships with everyone are as good as they've ever been. But I wanted to just give it time to make sure that it wasn't a fluke. Everyone's seen that breakup guy or that girl in a breakup who's pretending they're fine and they're not. So it's been a good 8, 9 months, 10 months where I've been systematically developing these concepts, and I work quite well with a visual structure. And the chap that I first met, Graham, he was really refreshing because he didn't want to unpack. He didn't want to basically be a therapist. He didn't want to unpack my future and past and all that kind of stuff. He just wanted to give me the toolbox to, if I ever get in that position again, to do that. And so I think it was the realization that our lives are basically set in two ways. They're based around the micro decisions that we make every day. The little decisions that we make reflect on what's going to happen. So that could be simple things like, are we going to get up and exercise that morning? Is going to probably affect how we feel, and that's going to probably affect how we speak to people that day and all that kind of stuff. It's a silly micro decision, but actually might have a long, impactful result on your life there. And there's also, it's almost like the weather. You can't control the weather, but you can have the right clothing in place. If it's raining, you can have a waterproof and an umbrella to make sure that when the weather is bad, that you've got the tools to protect yourself from it. So it was establishing that some things in my life and some things in your life can happen without you asking for it. And they tend to, I don't know why the universe does it, but they tend to be chained. They tend to come the more than one. But also our micro decisions that we make and the way that we react to stuff has a massive, profound impact on how we deal with them. So what we did was we kind of laid out what people need in their life to feel good, to feel like they're the best version of themselves. And if you imagine a ladder, the 2 rungs at the side of a ladder, and then each step, it's structured like that. So you make decisions in your life that are based on fitting this ladder model. And the first bit, the bit where you put your hands, is the emotional intelligence, the intelligence to recognize that something's wrong and you need to change. Now, there's lots of people that know that something is wrong, but they can't just put their finger on it. So you might recognize something is wrong in my life. I don't know why, but I'm losing my friendships. I don't know why, but I feel rubbish. I feel sad. I don't know what the change is, but just recognizing that is there and that something is wrong. Step 1, you're done. And one of the most important things that you start in that first rung of the ladder is security. and feeling safe. And that's different for lots of people. For me, it was having a safe space where I felt I could shut the door and be safe. My reality at the time was I worked from home. So my stress, the court case was all online. It was in COVID. So the high court case battle that we went through was in my lounge with my 6-week-old crawling around my feet. The relationship was breaking down. So it just wasn't a safe space. I had nowhere I could go where I could feel safe. And in fact, actually, when I went on the races in these stressful situations, I felt relaxed because it felt like a safe space for me. And I just couldn't figure it out. My fight-flight response was all over the place. I was just constantly in fight. So having security is the number one thing that we should be trying to make decisions around, of like, how can I, if I haven't got a safe space, how can I feel safe? And it can also lead into financial security as well. Scott Galloway does a hell of a lot of work on this, like the algebra of happiness and the algebra of wealth, of financial security just being an underpinning thing that can make us happy. It's one less stress. It leads to other things. So what decisions can I make in my life to make sure that I feel secure, I feel safe, and that I just have that one space where I can break from the world and recover? Because if you haven't got that, you're going to decline. And the one that's linked up to that is control. So once we've got that, it's control, of getting control of a situation in your life. So in my case, little things of security was changing things around at work, that I was a bit more financially secure. I'd been decimated, like my financial position was all over the place. What can I do to sort that? What can I do to take work out of the home? That's quite easy. Not have a laptop in the house.
It was a huge one for me as well, personally.
Yeah,
you're sitting in my solution.
Yeah, exactly. So all those kind of things, they're all micro decisions. That it seems, how do I stop, the reality was, how do I stop these suicidal thoughts? Stop working at home. Well, that surely isn't it. It's not that. It's loads of things, but that's going to definitely help. Control was all about getting control of my emotions, my reactions to things. Sometimes you can't control a situation. You've got to live in that. That court case was out of my control to a large part, but I could control the way that I was behaving and the way that I was presenting myself. For me, there was a complete lack of presence with people I was around because my mind was distracted. So control for me ended up being exercising. I ballooned up to 96 kilo. I used to walk around at 77. So running wasn't fun at 96 kilo. I was out of shape. I was really unhealthy. Couldn't run for a mile without stopping. Couldn't do a press up. Like, that's how bad I'd got from being a professional athlete to that. So it was all about gaining control of that situation, gaining control of my life, and just taking those little fundamental steps to build in that kind of plan again to gain control of just the little things, and making sure that I've got that lined up.
Are you still almost masking some of the things that you need to confront in your own head through running towards the pain?
Depends how hard I convince myself. To start with, I was very much in the running away, using it to kind of turn the volume down in my head, to quieten the voices, and just to kind of keep. Again, there was no awareness, but I think with every experience, with every race, with every place that you see, the reason you do it evolves, it changes. And as you learn more and more about how you enjoy those things, then I feel like it's a difficult question to answer. There probably will always be an element of using it in that kind of slightly more negative way, because I don't think that part of you ever really leaves. It's always there. It's part of your experience, and it's part of makes you. But I feel like over the last few years, I've cultivated enough tools to be able to use it as something that is helpful and is helping me live a life that is aligned with who I really am, which is another part of what the therapy was so good at, and also like understanding your values, not from a sense of honesty, integrity, these blanket terms that really mean fuck all.
They're on walls in recruitment offices.
Yeah, sure. It's understanding your values from a point of what do you actually do? Like what do you turn to when shit hits the fan? That was something that I recognized within myself. That when shit hits the fan, I turn to exercise. I can trust exercise to make me feel better about myself. And yes, it might be a coping mechanism in that moment, but that coping mechanism might just create that little bit of space for me to address the thing that needs to address later. So I think definitely have started to use it more so as a way to kind of improve my life.
Yeah. I often find I tap into the past a little bit more when I'm right up against it, which is the thing that often makes me reflect on, are you trying to prove something to an older version of yourself here, or is this genuinely, in your heart of hearts, a self-discovery, forward motion exercise? And I think it is the latter, but I do sometimes find myself thinking, well, essentially, why the fuck are you doing this? I have to stand there and go, right, okay, let's reflect on the past. And I think a lot of it comes down to being very grateful for the fact that I get to do this stuff, having spent a period of my life with no concept of what the future looked like or whether the future even had me in it. And I think that's why the word explore is one of the main pillars with why I do everything I do from a training point of view. It's because you've got a heavy Atlas stone at one end of the spectrum, and then you've got a stupidly long run at the other end. And there's lots of different exploration points along that spectrum. And I think there's lots of different value to extract from them. But I think people get too caught up in their own little boxes, thinking that this box is the best, that box is the best. Fuck you. Why are you doing that? Haha. Triathletes, why choose to be average at 3 sports rather than 1, says the average runner. And it's just like, well, why are we here? And why aren't we just happy that people are extracting value from things that they could otherwise not be doing? And I think you said something that was really at the core of how I think, which is this helping me? I can't remember how you worded it, but is this helping me be the person who I want to be or the person who I want to become? And I can imagine you have a much better understanding of who that person is now than you did before the therapy, before the ultra running, for example. So who is that person, and sort of what are the values at the core of why you do what you do now?
There's also the accepting the fact that who I am now is going to be very different to the person I am in, like based on experience. But who I am now is someone that I feel like gratitude, like you mentioned, being grateful for what we get to do. I'm grateful. I'm at a point now where I feel like I'm grateful for as grateful as I can be for every single experience that's got me to this point today. And I feel like what I'm doing now is a reflection of those lessons. And who that person is someone that wants to, where I derive kind of value now, it comes from many different places, but and I don't want it to sound wanky, like some sort of Miss World thing, but like the service to others, like I gained so much from that ultramarathon experience. It's the reason I'm coaching now is because I want to help people find their own version of whatever that was that I found in it. I'm really, that gets me going. Like well, that sounds a bit weird, but like it really excites me. Like the prospect of being able to help someone, like I wanted to be helped back when I was playing rugby, find that in themselves. So that's cool. But
you
also,
want to give them the key.
I'm going to steal that. I need to give them the key.
Yeah, take it.
So that's one aspect of it. But also with a team sport, there's so much value to be drawn from that team sport and that environment and how that can lift everyone involved. And I found myself at a point now where I'm very grateful. It was a complete accident this happened, but I've been able to put on my own multi-stage ultramarathon. This will be the 3rd year this year. And it's a 250k multi-stage event, and it's not a race. It's simply a challenge. So where there was conflict between individuals playing rugby, within this environment, there is no conflict between individuals. It's not a race. The whole purpose of the thing is to finish 250k, which, like I've said already, is a massive achievement in itself. And the way you get there is by supporting yourself, supporting others. And there's a team goal. There's a common goal. Like we spoke very briefly about, like that primal aspect. Like the goal was to get food for the camp. The goal is for everyone to raise money for a charity that is going to give back to people in the way that it's given to us. So who I am, I like to think is a representation of that environment. I'm trying to create that, like the sense of community.
First 6 to 9 months, I can imagine, were terrifying because essentially you had a decent lump of cash that you then had to convert into basically verifiable
Sales.
Yeah. But what would happen if that wasn't done? I mean, how are you dealing with the pressure as an individual of right, we are working to this end and we know this end, this wall, we have no money left.
Yeah.
So we need to get to that wall and then we need to ascend and get down from the obstacle of we need loads more money to then create another wall for ourselves to reach. Because it's not, you can't plan infinitely into the future. You can't ever get complacent and comfortable with the sort of process that you're describing. So how did you, going from a corporate job, manage that pressure and actually keep your head switched on to be able to deal with that? Because that's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, and I'd be lying if I'd said like I've like totally like mastered this and I've got it like all together. And I want to make that really, really clear. Like we definitely don't when it comes to like managing stress. And it is really, really, it is terrifying. And I think when we both left our jobs and you start like launching a brand on Instagram and you start doing this stuff and there's that period where all your mates like, this is really cool what you're doing, and they might see loads of stuff going on, and we were kind of chatting about this earlier on, they might see it like popping up and stuff. Like running a startup is like, it's like that like swan analogy, that duck analogy, right? Like up top everything looks fine and under control, but underneath it's like fucking furious. And that is exactly how I feel like a lot of the time, because you might see things that look like they're going great, but there's a lot of problems going behind the scenes. That's the nature of a startup. I think like it's a different kind of pressure you feel when you're working like a corporate job. So when you're working at AB InBev and you're getting like a salary and you've got like targets that you want to hit, there's pressure for sure. When you get money from someone that person has like worked really, really hard to like earn, and they are choosing to give you that cash to hopefully make a return instead of doing something else with it, that's an entirely different kind of pressure. And because that's like personal responsibility. And I would say like we both really feel that with our shareholders, not just that like we need to make sure that we like deploy the capital in like a really, really like as sensible a manner as possible, but like they've also like charged us with getting them like a really good investment. Like no one's really invested me to return like a small amount. Like they've backed us to like really go for it sensibly, but to like to provide something. So you definitely like feel that challenge. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I guess the answer is you don't necessarily cope with the pressure, but you obviously do, because we've got there, but the pressure is still prevalent.
Yeah,
and it's probably not going to go away.
I think
that's the thing, isn't it?
That's a really important point. I remember my old boss at AB InBev, who was really, really supportive when I told him I was leaving to set this up. I was like, I've always wanted to run like my own business. I think when I was younger, I was probably someone who would say like, I want to be an entrepreneur. I always want to run my own business. I think before you do it, you assume that means like you run your own diary and you're your own boss and you're all this kind of stuff. And like, yeah, there's an element of that, but actually I report to like a bunch of like investors and shareholders now. So,
and you're a slave to the business you've created.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
There's this like, this thing that you love that gives you like so much energy. And like, to be clear, like is my life's work is also this thing that gives you so much anxiety and like keeps you up at night. But that's part of it. And it's like anything, like, it's like if you're training for something, if you're like, so you've had some like pretty impressive rugby players on this pod over the last few weeks, like you have to sacrifice. There is pressure, and like pressure can actually be a good thing, because I think for Dunks and I would both say like it has encouraged us or motivated us to do stuff that 6 years ago we probably wouldn't have thought would be possible.
So on the theme of pressure, a lot of non-alcoholic beer businesses have gone under recently. And I have theories personally. I mean, there might be clear reasons that are available on the internet, but I haven't actually discovered that. But my logic as to why a few specific have gone under, with sort of an understanding of the market, the family's always been in the alcohol trade, is one thing. But more importantly, watching competitors essentially fall.
Yeah.
Is your immediate reaction a sense of opportunity or a sense of dread?
I think my immediate reaction is like neither of those things, if I'm honest. Like your immediate reaction is like sad. You are like, you're sad, and you definitely feel for the people running those businesses. Nobody knows more about running a non-alcoholic beer business than someone running a non-alcoholic beer business. Yeah. So it's funny, like when you get in a room at these trade shows, and I thought beforehand when you'd see like competitors, it would be like you're playing sport and you're like, I hate those guys. But you're not, because you're actually like, out of everyone in the world, like he or she knows exactly what I'm going through right now. So when you see one of them like go under, like it is really, really sad. And I do mean that, like, I'm big on this category. Like this category, my business can't work if the category doesn't work.
Yep.
So I want like good players in this category. I welcome them. So selfishly, I'm sad, but I also like really feel for people who have gone out. Like, I know how hard it is. And I think some people might see a headline. It's like, oh, business goes under, and you're like, oh, that person will be fine and they'll find a new job. Like that will be really sore. And if it was to happen to us, it would be really sore. So my first thing is sad. When you say like, is it dread or opportunity? Like, I don't think when the businesses go under, it doesn't prove that it's any harder, because we knew this would be hard. And a journalist actually called Dunks when one of our competitors went under and said it was kind of similar question, like, oh, they've said it's really hard, that's why they've gone under. And Dunks' reaction was like, I didn't start this because I knew it'd be easy.
Yeah.
Like, we knew this was going to be hard. Like, if you think about what we're doing, we're taking on the biggest branding machines in the world, right?
You qualified.
Yes.
Spoiler. And went into practicing, whereby you were essentially representing, you were a criminal barrister, but you were operating for you weren't representing a firm, you were representing.
So I worked in-house for a firm, and I did paralegal work to start with before I got offered pupillage, and then that's when another sort of part of my life started. So yeah, but criminal defence work is
Criminal defence, yeah. So, but as a barrister, you're self-employed, you are essentially at the mercy of the timelines of court, you are at the mercy of the work required.
There's no structure. You're just reliant on a pigeonhole. And when the brief comes in, so much so that actually at bar school, and this is another thing about discipline, super simple, but the bar school, one of the exams was, you've got a pigeonhole and you just have to wait for your brief to arrive. Yes, it's staged, it's all a bit cringe, but the point is, you could go in and out of bar school. No one lived in bar school. You'd have to go in or do camp out. What's the technique? Do you go at the end of the day, but your brief might have been there 5 hours before and you've wasted 5 hours? So even that's just kind of like playing with your brain. No one's going to tell you. So, and then you get the brief, but invariably they dropped it towards the tail end of the day.
Is it designed that way to test you?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. No doubt about it. So the brief's in the pigeonhole, you take that, and the level of work required to do it. I don't think, probably for human rights or whatever the reasons are, they can call it an overnight exam, but you are up all night. If you need to get through it, and 100% they would have put something in that brief that is designed to catch you out if you do not read it all. So that was an overnight exam, and again, tenacity-wise, but I'd already worked night shifts as a kid all the time, doing security work and goodness knows what work. So late nights, finishing at 4 o'clock in the morning, power napping for 20 minutes. None of that stuff was a problem, really. Not enjoyable, but I've got the brain and the mindset to do it. I don't mind doing it. I put myself through it and happily to do so. So many other people on the course were just wet wipes. Oh, I'm not even mean to sleep. I've only had 3 hours sleep. Do you know what I mean? So like just made of different kind of fabric, I guess, in that respect. But again, it's all things that you touched on. It's cross-transferable across different things in life. And I think when you go through anything, and that's nothing compared to what people go through in daily struggle, that's just a point about sleep and work ethic. But when you go through anything in life that's slightly elevated in terms of difficulty level or stress level or testing you, it makes normal life relatively easy and contextualize everything. And I think that's so important. I feel that people that haven't necessarily been tested in any element or don't necessarily put themselves in those positions, baseline life is quite hard to deal with for a lot of people. But someone like yourself or me will look at their issue or the thing that's catastrophic to them, and in relation to events that we can cast back to, it's nothing. And I think perspective is really, really key. And I think constantly pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone is only ever going to be a good thing. I know people say life's too short, and I appreciate that. I'm not working myself to complete death, but I genuinely think it means that on a daily basis, irrespective of what happens, subject to a certain few things around health and anything else that's a non-negotiable, it's only a little sort of tickle rather than a slap or a punch to me.
I think it's important to touch on the relative scale of it, because I think the get uncomfortable being uncomfortable thing has been done to death. And
what do you think about that, though?
I think it's entirely valid, but I think there's been cliches attached to it that mean that people get comfortable doing things that used to be uncomfortable to them and then get comfortable doing them. But it's it's a ladder.
Yes.
And I've seen enough ice baths on high-rise balconies in East London done for years at a time.
No comment, but I'm sick of it.
That's easy now. That's easy now. But it's a case of, I think the powerful thing here is that for any individual at any point in their life, if you turn up the dial 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4 point, 5 point, whilst somebody that you're sitting next to, let's say in the bar examination, could be 30 points higher than you, If you can just look 1 point, 2 point, 3 points higher day by day, you can stack that over time. And I think resilience going dormant is something that I've had to wrestle with over the years, whereby I've done big events and there's been a bit of a come down effect from the emotional work up towards that, and then a bit of a decompression that I've then refocused on maybe shorter distance or faster or heavier things. And the demands are very, very different. And I feel that there's times when I go outside in wind and rain and I'm like, wait a minute, what? Fuck?
Yeah.
You're a little bit uncomfortable and intimidated by this. Why is that? And then I'm like, well, you haven't been actually exposing yourself to this that often. So then it's reacclimatizing to that.
Yeah.
But it swings both ways, whereby essentially you at one end of the spectrum, don't get complacent.
No.
But at the other end of the spectrum, the power that you have to do one hard thing today to make you slightly better tomorrow, and then more importantly, free you up to do another hard thing the day after, is amazing. But comparing yourself to what other people are doing is your measure of discomfort is the wrong way to do it. It should all be through the lens of your current situation and how you can move that forwards incrementally.
Agreed. And I think also that the lens that we perceive other people's achievements through, no two people are the same in many different ways in terms of the commitments in life and all the other ancillaries, the holistic elements that we don't look at. So constantly striving to be someone else, whether it's chasing their material or their physical, is slightly misleading because you're not actually comparing something that's comparable or necessarily actually achievable. Or is it going to make you happy? And what makes you happy and what makes you content and fulfilled doesn't mean that if I try and go and do an Ironman now, I'm going to get the same gratification from it. So there isn't a single narrative, but like you say, as an overall theme and trend, push yourself.
Yeah,
It's simple as that.
yeah.
And if that's pushing yourself to be the quickest barista in the world, go and do that. I've got no judgment. You don't have to try and bench press or out bench press me. I don't care what you lift. I couldn't care less. I'm not watching you. So go and do what makes you happy, but don't give everything 2% and feel like you've underachieved, because that's the correct feeling because you're given 2%.
The only access that these nice guys will get to the development of the ability to adapt when things might go wrong, because they will, that's what life likes to do.
Things go wrong?
Is through taking the step towards the thing that actually has the 25 downstream potential risks inherent with it. And I can't remember what it was years ago, but the thing that I was recovering from a period of depression in 2016, and one of the biggest things that really helped me return from just a day-to-day human point of view, but ultimately improve my communication skills, made me much more effective in terms of just managing situations socially, managing situations professionally. Somebody, I can't remember, it's all a bit of a blurry period, which is the challenge. I can't remember who told me this, but the advice was make an effort to hold a conversation with somebody for 60 seconds or more on a topic that can be ostensibly boring. And whilst you might think it's not adding any value to their day, it's not interesting, it's not cool, people are impressed when you can maintain a conversation for 60 seconds or more, because people inherently don't do that because it's uncomfortable. So if you can be the person that takes the step forward and is the one that forces a conversation with a stranger for 60 seconds or more, that inherently, even if it's about the weather, is something that is admirable to that person, even though it might be fearful for you, because you're like, I'm just talking about the weather. That's terrifying. They'll think I'm an idiot. And that, for me, was a huge part of my rebuild from a confidence point of view, where if I was out walking the dog, if I was using a self-checkout machine, if I was talking to somebody at a coffee shop, if I saw somebody reading a specific book, the fear that I felt and then the power and control over myself that I felt once I'd had a simple basic that could often be 3, 5, 10, 12 minutes, by the way, key detail.
Yeah.
I'd already listed in my head all of the downstream risks and ridicule that I'd been manifesting for quite a while in a bit of a negative period of my mental health, a very severe negative period of my mental health, in fact. So coming out of that, it was a real breaking of the inertia, and the momentum that built from that meant that the skills that I developed through breaking that inertia meant that that list of 25 shrinks to 1, which is, I'm married now, but if I went up to approach a woman now, the worst thing that could happen in my head at the point of moving over would be, it could be a no, about turn, move on. That's
the conversation doesn't happen. That's it.
Yeah. So it's, again, I think that's broadly applicable to so many things in life that go beyond this, which is why I think that the patterns of behavior are so key. And I think it's why the notion of success or failure really jumped into my head as the two directions these things can go. But I think the the learning for me from that I've carried with me is just actually how much skill acquisition comes from leading with authenticity.
Yeah.
And
I I like that a lot. No, I like what you're sharing for a couple of reasons. When I got divorced in my late 40s, I'd been married twice. I had never really lived alone as an adult. I'd never really dated since, in college, my idea of dating was nice guy seduction, sit next to a girl, try to impress her, know all the answers, offer to do things for her. Maybe at some point say, I don't guess you'd want to go out with me, would you? And then if I got a girlfriend, I kept her forever. So here I was single and alone and depressed. My business wasn't expanding like I thought it would. I was living alone. My kids had graduated from high school, and my son went in the Marines. My stepson went away to college, and so it was a challenging time. And I did the same thing. I just made myself start getting out in public. I'd go around people. If I could do anything in public, I'd go do it in public. Or if I was reading my Sunday newspaper or reading my Kindle or working on my laptop or even eating. I'd go to like happy hour at restaurants and I'd talk to the bartenders. I'd talk to the people. I really worked at being a social animal. And it really transformed my life. And it got to where it became, how I started often meeting other people, guys and women, expanding my life, dating women, to where guys, my clients, started saying, Robert, what are you doing? You're having success meeting women. You're having success getting laid. Teach us. And I go, I'm not a dating coach. But it really was built around just getting out of my comfort zone, getting out in public, and where I kind of came up with this mantra for guys when I was in my dating programs: get out of the house, expand your route, linger in public, talk to the people you meet, test for interest, and that's a skill set I can teach, very simple 3-point skill set, and then walk through the open doors. You don't have to go out and make things happen. You don't have to go out and find the prettiest woman and think up some clever line to go talk to her and get her to give you a phone number. You just start interacting with people, get out of your comfort zone. And I think a really powerful thing that does is not only it expands you, but it makes you look more socially adept, which is very attractive. But I think another thing that does, and really relates to that depression, is when we're not in a state mentally of being challenged, like, we got this problem to solve or this thing to build or whatever, we kind of rest in a part of our brain called the default mode network. And the default mode network is just is me. And they call it default mode network is because it's where the brain goes when it's kind of at idle, when it doesn't have work to do, challenges to be met. And so basically it starts just looking at the whole world through the lens of me. And, that could lead to all kinds of really negative, not pretty stuff. Well, I'm not good enough looking, or I'm not successful enough, or nobody wants to talk to me, or why don't I have a girlfriend at this age, or why, and so that default mode network, it doesn't have to all go to that negative, but it often just starts seeing the whole world in terms of me. It's very ego oriented. Now, what they've found is that psychedelics take you out of that default mode network. That's why you see everything is one and everything is love. Meditation takes you out of it. But I also believe going out and being in that social place that you're talking about and kind of just getting curious about people rather than going, I hope I don't say something stupid. I hope I don't embarrass myself, where you really do get curious about people and carry on a conversation of 60 seconds or more. And as you said, they often surprisingly go longer. It takes you out of that default mode network, and it lights up other parts of the brain that in general are going to make you feel better than just sitting around in that part of the brain that's all about me. So, I mean, there's a lot of, just good, that was great advice you got.
It was life-changing in many ways. And it's something I try and exude now I kind of just enjoy it. It's interesting to, I think it gives, I don't want to sound egotistical anyway, but it's a skill that I've developed that I think can give other people confidence as well. Because if you get somebody that isn't used to having a conversation with a stranger for more than 10 seconds or so, and then they do it, then that's one rep that they've completed, which might lead to another rep. And I'm firmly of the opinion that life is just repetitions after repetitions.